So this is going to be a sample library we're looking at today. It's not a real one, so don't get too hung up on the details here. And try your best to imagine either your existing or your potential future TinyCat library in place of this, right? So as we're talking about the logo, imagine your logo and sort of project onto this as much as you can, okay? So since Library Thing and TinyCat are intrinsically linked, they're like the same account, really. And you'll use the exact same login for both. As the main administrator of your TinyCat, your login is going to be the same as your Library Thing login. So I'm just going to show you where to log in, as I need to do that for the webinar anyway, and it'll be good context for you. So basically, there's a little padlock icon by default at the bottom right corner of your homepage. And if you click that, it opens up a pop-up where you can enter your primary administrator password. And this is the login for the main admin of TinyCat. There is this second tab here, which is where other people that you've created accounts for in your TinyCat as like staff members or other people at your organization who are helping to manage your library in some way. Maybe they're volunteers or staff members or billing folks, right? You'll create a separate login and they'll log in here, okay? But the main administrator logs in right here. And after you've entered that password, you'll click sign in. Okay, and before I click sign in, I just want to emphasize that this password is really sensitive. It's really important. You don't want to share this password with a lot of people. We've already mentioned that anyone with this password, right, can log into your TinyCat admin and see your patron info. And they can also log into Library Thing and change your catalog records or delete your catalog entirely, right? So you want to be really secure with the password that you create for your account. And this is the main administrator password. Again, you can create alternative passwords for other folks at your library, but just try and keep this main password as secure as possible. Okay. And once you click sign in, that padlock icon turns into a house icon and brings you right to your TinyCat admin pages. And we'll come back to these pages in a bit. So padlock turns to a house once you're logged in. That's how you know you're logged in as an administrator. Okay, I'm going to click up here in the right-hand corner to return to the home page and see that that's still a little house icon. So that's a helpful piece of information about signing in and also, why you want to be really cautious with that main administrator password. Okay, you can hide this padlock slash house icon from the patron's perspective if you wish to. Just note that you shouldn't do that if you have those sort of other people trying to sign in, like as volunteers or staff members on your TinyCat, because that's the only way they can log in. So you want to keep that visible if that's the case. Now, a quick note. So this login and this up here, this like patron sign in button, this like account button for your patrons, those two are actually in the process of potentially being changed in the near future. So if you're watching this recording in the future, and yours looks a little different as we go through this, that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. TinyCat's always growing and evolving. So just a heads up that those might look a little different in the near future. Okay. So I'm going to start with a tour of the homepage here in just a second, but I want to also show those who don't already know sort of how TinyCat works. Okay, so I'm a patron and I've been given this link. I've come to the homepage and I can do a search for anything I want, right? I can click around the homepage, of course, and we'll talk about that in depth, but I just want to show you that I can do a search. It will search for everything I have put in here throughout the library and show me all the results. And from there, I can narrow my search down. I can reorder the search. And as a librarian, I can also take this search URL and use it for various things. I'll talk about that later. But as a patron, I can search and look at book information or other item information because you can catalog more than just books in TinyCat and Library Thing. And if my library allows me to, I can also place a hold on this book or check it out or ask about the book or even share it on various places. Totally up to you as the librarian what sort of circulation options and sharing options you provide to your patrons. All of this is really customizable. But I just wanted to show you an example of what this could look like. And we go through all of those options in depth in the regular webinar. But today we're focusing on the homepage. So with the context of sort of what the inside of TinyCat looks like as a patron, I want to return to the surface of TinyCat and bring us back to this homepage. Okay, now we're going to go through the homepage in detail. So at the top of the page, we've got this navigation bar. And from that, I have three different buttons, right? We've already clicked this one a couple times. It just brings us back to the home page. The next button here in the list is the language selector. Okay, so from here, I, as a patron, can pick a different language to display in TinyCat. We'll talk about that more further along the webinar. I also have a patron account button that I can click to sign in as a patron. All right, so if I were a patron visiting the library, I wouldn't go down here as an administrator to sign in. I would sign in up here. Okay. Or as I might sign in as I start checking out a book as well. That's another option. Next on the page, we've got a logo, and I'm going to talk about ideal logos and how you want to set that up, but you might choose to display an official logo for your organization or for your library. You might also just want to put up an image of some kind that's related to your library or just pleasant to look at. It's up to you. But we'll talk about where you set that up and some of the ideal specifications you'll want for images soon. Next, I've got a title here, and notice that this is the name of my library. I've also got a short version, like an abbreviated version, up here in this button. And we're going to talk about those more as well. We're going to talk about everything on this page more, actually. And below the title, above the search bar, is our welcome text. Okay. And I've got some of this is sort of just welcoming, hospitable sort of information, and some of it is more practical information about, what they can do on the page. And below the search bar, I've got some more practical information in bold and some other sort of like maybe less important or less crucial to TinyCat information about like the physical library or ways to get in touch with the librarian, right? And notice this email here is linked. We'll talk about that very soon. So the links at the bottom of the page and the cover carousel here right above it are two ways that my patrons can browse my library rather than just searching for things, right? So here they can see an animated display of all of my cover images. And with these links down here, these are actually search links within the library. So my patron can come down here, and my librarian has decided that, probably a lot of these patrons want to see old books for some reason, right? So my patrons can just click that and go right to this targeted search that the librarian has set up ahead of time. So when you're deciding what sort of things you might want to link on your homepage, there's a few things you want to consider. For example, if you're doing a search link, so links to searches within your TinyCat library, like we just saw, then you're probably going to want to spend some time deciding what ones to put up. What searches are you going to put on your homepage for your patrons? You might choose to front some searches for them that are things they're going to search. Like I know my patrons are going to be interested in old books, so I've put that right here on the homepage. Okay. I'm doing the search for them, I'm doing the work in advance for them. And then I also might put things up on the homepage that my patrons wouldn't know to look for, right? So links to searches for things that they probably didn't know we had in the library, but I want to help them explore and show them all the cool things we have. So I've added links to those as well, right? So you decide what searches you want to promote on your homepage. And I recommend, again, just thinking about what your patrons are interested in, what they're gonna look for, and what they might not even think to look for on their own. Okay. And then we'll talk about how to customize all of this just very shortly here. I also wanted to show you that there is an advanced search form if your patrons are very interested in that. And, it's something that your patrons would have been used to using potentially in like a university setting or something like that. Then you can absolutely take this URL as well and put it somewhere more obvious on the homepage if this, isn't really being noticed by your patrons, you can definitely promote it more. But I would say the majority of TinyCat patrons aren't really using advanced search that often. I think the general search is a lot more common, as well as just clicking through these browsing methods here. Okay, so we're now going to move over to the settings and how we set up our TinyCat homepage. Okay, I'm going to click this house icon, which again is a shortcut to my admin pages. And from here, I'm going to click settings. And we're going to spend most of our time down here on this homepage settings tab. But I want to start off on basics because the library name is edited under basics, which makes sense. It's a pretty basic thing to edit, right? So this first box is actually, let me open up the homepage again in a new tab. Excuse me, just so we can reference it. All right. So this name here is edited in the first box. And this smaller name, this abbreviated version, is edited right here. And you don't have to make this abbreviated if your library name's already short. It's totally up to you what you put in these two places. Now, when you first create a TinyCat, you'll notice that the name here is defaulting to your username for your account. And you'll see I've got sort of a funny username on this fake library, right? It's not a real account. But I've got this is my username here for this account. And you'll always find your username for your account in the URL, in the link that you share with your patrons. So when you're creating your account and deciding on your username, you want to keep this in mind, right? You want the username to be something probably pretty easy to type or pretty short, right? So it's easier to share and easier for patrons to access that link or type it in themselves. And you probably also want it to be something more organizational or more about your library rather than something personal, like a first name, last name. And I know this is a bad example of that, but it's a bad example in a useful way because you get to see how this is sort of not the same as this, right? Even though it's visible. So if you've already created your account with TinyCat and your username isn't what you want to be displayed in your URL, you can absolutely change your username and that will automatically change your TinyCat URL for your homepage. So please feel free to reach out if you have any trouble updating your username. So here we go. That's where you update the name and where the name comes from, and it'll just be the default username until you change it. So you can change it to whatever you want and include an abbreviated version if you wish to. Now we're going to jump down to the homepage settings and we're going to work through these one at a time, slowly through the page, just to show you all the options that you have, okay? Um, so try to follow along again. If you have your account set up already, feel free to bring that up in your device or in a second device and click along with me and just try and follow along with the various tips and processes here. So first and foremost, we've got our logo, right? That's that ship that we saw at the top of the page. So you can click here to upload a logo from your device or drag one in from the web. And it's pretty intuitive, right? So what kind of logo do you want to pick, right? How do you decide on an image there? So one thing is that if for some reason I'm really zoomed in on this library, I mean, this is a bit excessive, but just to give you the idea, I want to make sure that this image that I've selected, this file, has a lot of pixels and that it's good quality. That way, when I'm zoomed in here, all the lines are nice and crisp and everything is easy to see and looks professional. Another thing I want to keep in mind is the background of the image, right? So perhaps an image with a see-through or transparent background is a good idea. This is an example of that. If I kind of click this ship and drag it around the page, you can see there's no background behind it, right? It's actually a transparent background. But it would be just as good to have a truly white background, right? And then you'd see like a white square traveling behind it if you dragged it. Because that either way, whether it's transparent or white, it's going to blend really nicely with the background of TinyCat, and you'll be able to just sort of have a slightly sleeker look, and it looks a bit more professional that way. Of course, like I said, you could include your official organization logo or library logo if you have one. And you could also, and if you don't have one or that's not really suitable for this for any reason, you could also just choose an image that either is related to your organization in some way or to your library. Or just something pleasant. That's totally fine. It is nice to have some sort of picture up here, but it's not totally necessary. You can absolutely go without it if you wish to. Um, and of course, if you do get something like, I don't know, maybe a scenic picture or something, you want to again make sure that it has a white background or that it's transparent because you don't want to see like sort of thoughtless edges to a photo up here because then it just looks like you've dumped a photo here, rather than something that looks a little bit more like a logo, right? So it's okay to do that, but I think ideally you have something that looks either official like a logo or like an official sort of picture decorating the page. And if you, of course, if your logo is like a square shape or something, then that's just as good. Okay. Next, we have the library name display. So you can actually hide that library name, and you'll watch me going through my settings here. You'll see me saving the changes multiple times today, just so I can come back to the homepage and refresh and show you how the changes are affecting it. So, obviously, it's nice to have a name of the library visible front and center on the homepage. So why would you hide it? Well, if your logo for your library or your org has your organization name in it in some obvious, legible way, then it might look a little silly or redundant, perhaps, to have it in both places. So that's a reason to hide it. But if that's not the case, I do recommend just displaying that title of your library front and center on the page. Next, we have our welcome message, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but notice that this is the text between the title and the search bar, okay? And then down here, we have a few different options. So this is the content shown right underneath the search box. And you can actually change what displays there, right? We also have content added at the bottom of the page that we can also switch around. So notice how for each of these areas, I have three options. I can either hide that area entirely, I can ask it to display links, or I can have sort of free HTML or free flowing text, basically. Right? So in my sample library here, we've got that free HTML, that text option above, and we've got links below. And notice the different formatting there, okay? So, but I can switch that. And luckily, this settings page is pretty sticky. So if I switch between these as I'm sort of saving and going back and forth, trying to see how it looks and playing around a bit, it is fine, right? Notice how that text is still there. It didn't delete as I switched back and forth. So I'm going to actually switch them now just to show you what that looks like. There's only one link here, so it's not going to be this long row of links. Just a heads up, you're just going to see one link. And I'm switching this to text, okay? So now I'll have my link above and my text below when I refresh this page. So I'm refreshing now. All right. And indeed, we just have that one link here, but it could be as many as I wanted. And we've got that text down here now. Did you notice that the text changed? Right? So the format of the text has shifted. It's now in this sort of box and it's a kind of more subtle gray. It's also aligned left rather than centered. So I would say that this text is formatted now. When you have text at the bottom of your page instead of above the cover carousel, you'll notice that it kind of reads more as sort of helpful information that you might want to know, but isn't very urgent, right? It's sort of an afterthought or some additional information rather than the crucial information that you want right up in the middle of the page. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, and you can play around with how the info that you might want in each place looks, right? And I'm going to go ahead and refresh that page again just to show you what it looked like before, right? So here now the text looks a little bit more in your face. It's looking like, hey, this is important. You should know this. And the links at the bottom are a little bit more supplementary. Okay. And one thing to consider for your patrons is what you want your patrons to do for example, searching or clicking these search links or clicking these, versus what you want your patrons to know. Some of this sort of information, right? And there's an interesting balance you can play with there. A lot of places will want to put first what their patrons need to do. And even within the text, I'm doing that, right? So I'm saying, this is what you can do, and you might want to know these things as well. Okay. So if I were to really lean into that principle, I would probably put the links up here and the need to know info down here. Okay. So that's an idea you can play with when you're organizing your own information in your library here. So I want to show you how to set up links in this format, right? So I'll just bring us over here because there are fewer links to look at. So I'm going to click, if I've decided I want links up here or down here, I just click links. And then I can add a new link. And it's going to ask what sort of word I want displayed here. So I'm just going to type the word example. And now I can either type in or paste in a URL, okay? A link. So when my patron clicks the word example, where am I sending them? And that's what I'm going to enter into this second box. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, right? And when you're doing a link to something external, then you might want to, then you can just, go to that external site, copy the link, paste it here. And then after you save, just go back and check that it works. But also keep in mind that whenever you create links to external sites, you're telling your patrons to leave TinyCat, right? You're telling them to click this link and go to a different website. So you might want to limit how often you or how many external links you include here. But search links are always nice, right? They're already here in your TinyCat library, and those are just helping them to explore it and keeping them within it. So that's a nice option. And so how do you get a nice search link to put right here? Okay. We talked about this a little bit. So let's just say I want to look at books about folk tales, and I know my patrons are going to be interested in this because it's a folklore library, right? And obviously, this is a fake library, so there are only two books when I type that, which probably wouldn't be a great search to put on the homepage. But imagine that there are hundreds of books here. I can then filter down that search and reorder that search if I want. And when I'm ready, when the search looks like exactly what I think my patrons are going to need or want by clicking that link, right? Then all of those changes I've made to the sorting and the filtering, they'll all be captured. All of those changes are captured in this URL. So I can highlight that link now and copy it and paste it. And then when I save my changes and I go back to the home page, I can just click that link and all of those changes will be present. And you just saw that because I'm sort of treating TinyCat a little strangely right now, going back and forth a lot. So that was just security making sure I was actually a human, which is good. Now you see it's already sorted it by acquisition and filtered it how I wanted to. And you can do more targeted searches. And we talk more about other kinds of searches you can set up in the regular webinar. I just wanted to show you what that process looked like. Okay. And it's very easy to delete links here, and you can also reorder them, right? You just click reorder, and then you can move them up and down and click set order again. But there is another way to put links in your TinyCat homepage, and we've already seen this before, right? Remember this email link, right? So how do we get that kind of a link in the middle of this free-flowing text? So if we come down to any of these text boxes, you might see, and some of you might recognize this, what we call HTML, right? And it's even right here if you have trouble remembering what it's called. So you can easily Google this, but it's basically a language that tells the computer how to format the text that I've put here, okay? So there's some very basic things I'm going to show you, but using HTML, sorry, I zooted down the page a little quickly there. I've inserted this link, right? And I'm going to bring this to you and show it because inserting a link is a bit of a longer HTML than some of the other things that you might play with. So I'm actually going to put this one in the chat. so that you all can have quick, easy access to it and save it somewhere if you want to. So when I've decided what link I want and what word I want displayed with the embedded hyperlink within it, um, I, I can't just put the URL in the text here and have it be clickable, right? It would display. I'll show you really quickly what I mean by that actually. Um, so if I just put this URL here and I click save, when I go to my homepage and refresh, I can see that URL, but notice it's not clickable. So there's nothing embedded in that link. That isn't a live link that will take me somewhere. So the HTML is what's going to allow you to make those links live. So you decide where you want your patrons to go and what word you want to be clickable. Okay. So you're going to take that link and put it right in between the quotation marks in this HTML. Okay. So your link is going to go here, and whatever text you want displayed is going to go right after the next arrow. Okay. So this is saying to the computer, hey, make this link live in this text and then stop it after that. That's all that's saying. Okay, so that's the sort of language, and I am now putting that HTML in the chat so that you all have access to it. Okay, so you would just replace the word link with your link and replace the word text with whatever you want displayed. So that's a quick and easy way to do that. And then you are able to have the link, I'm just refreshing here, embedded in your text. Okay. And notice that, again, this can be an external link. It can be a link to a search within TinyCat, or in this case, it can be a link to email, right? To start sending an email. And that's called a mail to link, right? And you can see an example of that right here. Okay. And that would just tell, if I clicked that as a patron, that would tell my computer to start sending the email. It would open my email app, that sort of thing. So up to you if you want to include any links here instead of here, but it's totally an option. And we'll talk about some reasons why you might do that later. But I also want to show you just some very basic HTML that you can use here. So this is telling the computer to make the text bold. And this is telling it to stop making it bold. So that's why those first two lines are bold. And this BR, I like to think of it as for a break, right? So it's putting a break in the text. So we've got things like B, and notice these brackets, right? So a B for bold, and then slash B to stop making it bold. It's the same for italics, right? We might start making it italic, put whatever you want here, and then stop making it italic. So whatever will be italics in italics, but nothing afterwards will be. Okay. And then to add a break, you just put a little BR there. Okay. So HTML, it can get a lot more complicated than this, but we recommend keeping it pretty simple in TinyCat. If you're having trouble with your HTML and you want to include it, or you have a vision of some way you want your text formatted in TinyCat and you're having trouble bringing that to life, always feel free to email me. Don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll be happy to do my best to help you bring that vision to fruition here. Okay. So next we've got our animated cover carousel. And this is that sort of cover display that's moving across the homepage. So you can hide this if you want to. Now, most patrons really like it. Notice I just clicked hide animated display. I'm going to click save to show you what the homepage looks like without that. So most patrons really enjoy the cover carousel, and also so do a lot of librarians, right? It's kind of a pleasing, very visual thing to see on the homepage. There is a good reason why you might want to hide it, though, and that would be if, for whatever reason, your library doesn't have a lot of images for your items. An example of this could be maybe a library with a lot of electronic or digital articles, right? Those don't really have cover images most of the time. So it wouldn't look great for a bunch of books without cover images to be floating across the screen, right? It's fine. It's totally fine. But that's one example why you might choose, okay, I think I like it better without the display of covers. But if you have covers, it's a treat. People like it. And it's also useful. right? It looks good and it's one way for your patrons to browse. So you do have two options for what books it displays in that cover carousel. You can click this drop down here to choose between, you get to choose between recently added items and random items from your library. So we've been looking at recently added items. Oh, let me actually save that now. Excuse me. Great. Okay, refreshing the page, and there they are. So every time I refresh the page, it's going to show me the same books in the same order, right? And this is the book I most recently added to my library, and this is the book I added second most recently, and so on and so on. Okay. Um, However, if I switch that to randomized items, then every time I refresh that page, or every time I visit this library anew, it's going to show me different books, right? It's shuffling the books entirely. And so it can be really fun if you have random items. And again, it's just checking that I'm human because I'm refreshing the page so often. But you're going to see different items. So for my real library, I love this random option because it allows me to see books that I've maybe forgotten in my library or things that I just haven't thought about in a long time. So it can be a lot of fun. It's also fun for your patrons because when it's randomized, it allows them to see something different every time they visit your library. So it's up to you, whether you display it and which version you display. Okay. And now there's two things on this homepage that we have talked about, at least briefly, but we're not on this homepage settings page. Okay. I just said page a bunch of times, so thanks for bearing with me there. But so there's two things, right? One of them we already talked about in settings, right? It wasn't in the homepage settings, but it was in basics, and that was the library name, right? Remember, so if you're changing the name of your library in either location, that's going to be here in your basic settings. But there's one more thing that we talked about on the homepage and pointed to that was not manageable in the homepage settings. It wasn't there to manage. So I'm wondering if any of you remember, it was the language selector, right? So to get there, you're actually going to go to your settings and scroll down to languages. And from here, you can pick and choose between how 45 different languages at this point that you might want to offer your patrons in TinyCat. So you can choose one default language, and that means that whenever anyone visits your library for the first time on TinyCat, that's the language that will display. That's the default language for your library. But you can then offer, and then that doesn't have to be English, right? So you can offer a default language of your choosing from these 45 languages. And then you can also offer additional languages for your patrons to pick from, right? So this sample library, the default language is English, but I'm also offering my patrons French and Italian if they want to see my library that way, right? So they would just click this selector, this language selector, and click the language they want to see instead, right? And it even tells, I've decided to tell them that they can do that. And notice I've put it in italics, right? So it's differentiating it a little bit. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that you have italics and bold and hyperlinks all on a homepage. That can be a bit much, but I'm just doing it to show you all the options here. So you can select as many languages as you want to offer your patrons, and then they can switch between those to see your library in those different languages. So it's a nifty feature. It's a new feature too. Now you can also adjust your welcome message to display something different for each language. And remember, the welcome text is this text here between the title and the search bar. So if my patrons are viewing it in English, they'll see this, right? Notice I've added some extra breaks for some spacing, and I've also added some italics using HTML. Okay. And in French, right, I've decided that, hey, if my patrons click French, I want them to see this welcome information in French. And I also want them to know, maybe somebody doesn't speak French or something, or they speak enough to see this, but they don't want to see it in French right now. They can switch languages in French as well. Okay. And the Italian version is here too. So if I click through that and I click on French, right, I now see this welcome text in French. If I click on Italian, I now see it in Italian. So you don't have to set this up. If you want, you can keep your homepage consistent for every language that you offer. That's fine. And you don't have to click any additional languages, right? So you can set a default language, and that language selector will only appear if you select multiple languages. So if you also make your library available in Croatian or Finnish or something, then the language selector will appear. But you can pick a default language without enabling that. Okay, so what does this change, really? It is not going to change everything. So if my patron has selected Italian, right, we see that this has changed, but the title of the library hasn't changed, right? Nor has the text down here. And if I scroll down, I notice that the links also haven't changed to Italian, right? So there's only one thing on your homepage that you create that changes per language selected, and that's the welcome text, again, between the title and of the library name, and the search bar. So excuse me. So if you'll see that other sort of structural things of TinyCat have been translated. So the sort of canonical structural pieces of TinyCat will adjust to the language, but the information that you've entered, such as these tags that you've created, won't necessarily change, right? This text that you've entered won't necessarily change unless you've added alternative welcome messages down here in this language's settings. Okay? But notice that like this is in Italian now. If I start logging in as a patron, that's all in Italian. And if I were to click on this book, right, I'll see, okay, the title of the book is still in English because that's how I entered it. I entered it in English. Um, as is the description and this review from a library thing member, right? So certain things, especially the things that I've entered or selected for my records are just going to be in the language that they were entered in, no matter what that language is, right? You will find reviews for books on Library Thing that aren't in English, and those don't translate either, right? So that's the idea, is that if you've written something or selected something for a book, we're not going to change that if because your patron has changed the language, because translation is tricky. Right, we don't want to provide, shoddy translations by translating things automatically without being able to check them. So the structure will change, and if you've cataloged your books in Italian, then of course the Italian information will show here. And there's ways that you can replace even the description to be Italian or whatever language you'd like. And then you'll notice some more canonical pieces of information have also been translated. So all of these field titles are translated. And so is like the word English is here inglese, right? So that's changed. Like the word for pages, the phrase other authors has changed. So there are certain things that will change, but others are sort of things that you've entered or selected, and we don't take the liberty of translating those. You are welcome to enter things in multiple languages or catalog in other languages. But I just want to sort of hammer the nail there to death, just to clarify what translating the library does and does not do, right? So it's really an interface shift. So if I started checking out this book, etc., as a patron, I would know what to do in Italian. Okay. So that's a fun option you can play with, but you can also just keep it really easy and just use one language, and make that the language you catalog your library in as well. So, okay, we have spent a lot of time talking about home pages, obviously, and I wanted to show you more than just one example from a fake library. So I'm now going to show you a few real library home pages from TinyCat. And then indeed, we will have some time at the end for questions. So let's just flip through these really quickly. So this is my actual TinyCat library. And you see I've got an image that has a white background, right? So it allows this to sort of blend in naturally. But It is actually, there is actually a background on that image. It's not transparent. I've used some basic HTML to, or maybe intermediate HTML to adjust the font of my library name. I've added a little heading to the links here, which you can do just by entering a display text of those two boxes in the top box and just put nothing in the second box for the link, and it'll display with the links, but won't be clickable. And then I've got some text here for other things that people might want to check out. Okay. Next, we're going to look at an example of a school library. Okay, so they've got a nice logo up here with their like official NC, and they've got their title for their library in both places, but it's fine, right? Like this is pretty small, so it's nice that you can get the full version here. And they've got some welcome information here and some sort of instructional details here. And then notice that at the bottom, they used this text section to have like a quote that they can change regularly, which I think is really nice. It's a great use of this sort of more subtle text field at the bottom of the homepage. So the next example we're going to see is a religious library. This is a Quaker Meeting Library from Australia. And they also have this nice logo up top, and theirs is a little bit more visible. So, if it's one of those cases where you might choose, okay, do I want to display the title as well as this? But it's still a little small, so it makes sense that they've displayed this here. And they've got a link to their website as well as an internal link to TinyCat to look at their newer books, right? So maybe they're tagging those and they've created a link to that specific tag. Okay, or collection. And then I want to also show you the Folio Seattle Library, which is a nice example. Again, a great logo, a clear title, and they've kept it pretty clean, right? They don't have much welcome text beyond the default, which is great. And they also have a little header for their links here, and they've got some sort of need to know information at the bottom, right? So they're fronting what patrons do first and what they want patrons to know later, versus what patrons can actually do when they come here. So those are some options of hopefully inspiring examples for what you can do in your TinyCat homepage. And if you go to librarycat.org at any point, that is our main brochure site, right? So you saw how I just deleted the library info. So it's a quick way to get to it, but it's just this, and I'll put this in the chat as well. So this is where you'll go to sign up and start your trial if you haven't already. And you can get some other useful details here, but if you scroll down, you'll find a bunch of sample libraries that you can look at, get inspiration from. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's similar examples for both schools and for religious libraries. So you can see more targeted examples if either of those qualifiers match your library. And get some more sort of specific inspiration. Okay, so that is the webinar on homepages. Thank you guys so much for coming and bearing with the very detailed and specific instructions and tips and tricks here. But I hope that that was useful. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to hang out. We'll have just about, 5 minutes, so I can probably only take a couple of questions. But if you haven't already, please put your email in the chat if you want to receive a follow-up email or if you want to type out a question that I can answer later on. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.